emphasize with my families is they want to spend time with a soldier parent. The parent wants to sleep because they've been on a plane for 27 hours. They've been in combat. They want their bed. They want to go to bed. They want to take a hot shower, and that's what they need to do. So herein lies some more confusion for the child. When the parent returns from being in theater and goes straight to bed, the child's like, what's going on? Dad must not have missed us. Dad doesn't need us anymore. Yeah. What's wrong with me now that Dad doesn't want to be with me? So what we need to try to do when we get these families and these children is to let them know that once the soldier returns, they need rest, and once they can get the rest they need, then it's time to do family things.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot for a teacher to know who's not inside the family.
Well, I guess I was thinking more along the lines of like maybe a counselor also, or
Right.
a psychologist, whoever, or a mental health provider who may be working with these families. But if a teacher understands these intricacies of the different stages, it's going to put her or him in a better position to help these children.
To understand that the coming and going of a parent to and from the war it can be confusing and can incite uncertainty and
Very much so.
and sadness.
It can. And to talk about the sadness, once the soldier returns for the rest and relaxation period, as soon as they set foot on the ground coming off that plane, the clock is ticking. They've got 2 weeks. And in that 2-week period, I've seen families try to do everything possible. Go to the beach, go to Disney, go visit relatives, go to the movies, go to the park, do all these things and try and jam it into 2 weeks of just a whirlwind of activity because Dad's got to go. He's only got 3 more days left. What can we do today? And some families do that, some families don't. Those that have been through it numerous times know the routine, and they can make those choices. Those newer families that are new to R&R, sometimes I find try to jam too much into it. But when the time comes at the end of that 2-week period where the soldiers got to go, it's just like when they left for the deployment in the first place. Mm-hmm. The sadness, the depression sets in, and these other things. I've had one little girl in particular who was an adolescent who just simply chose not to be home for rest and relaxation because she didn't want to face the sadness of having to say goodbye to her soldier father again during R&R. Just wanted to avoid the whole thing entirely.
So she didn't see him?
Didn't see him. Hurt his feelings, but she was doing what she needed to do for her.
Was that a good move on her part?
It's what was best for her.
Yeah. Okay.
Just the sadness is at a level that she just didn't want to face.
All in all, do you think that the military is on top of this?
I think they're on top of it as best as they can be.
Yeah.
And I know that there's always incentives, not incentives, but programs to offer to these military families to help them through the different things that they're working with. But let's get to that last stage, the deployment, the rest of the deployment stage. If we're looking at a year-long deployment, so we're looking at maybe 6 more months. So when the soldier returns for the reunion stage, which is the very last stage, this is the end of the deployment cycle, and it is when the reintegration takes place, not only in the family, but also into society, where the soldier returns with whatever that soldier is bringing with them, whether it's a physical injury, social emotional trauma, PTSD, whatever. It's a very difficult stage, and the family needs to have a lot of patience during the period that the soldier comes back. Now, the typical reintegration process, I've heard 6, 7, 8 months, sometimes 9, for the full reintegration process to take place. The bad news about that is many of the deployments are going to happen again after 6 or 7 months.
Mm-hmm. Starts all over again.
Before the reintegration cycle can be completed, the soldier goes out again. And it's just a very difficult cycle.
You said at the beginning of our conversation that you think that in your 30 years of working with kids on the military bases, that we're now in a period where there is more manifestation of emotional behavioral problems? What is that, just your gut telling you that, or is that statistical?
There may be some statistics on it. I'm not familiar with it. All I know is what I'm seeing.
You're seeing that
with the children that I work with.
And what explains it?
I think it's kind of a web of different things that are going on. We're having a lot of young families joining the military. So those parenting skills that are needed to maintain a real stable environment maybe aren't as sharp as they're supposed to be. Kind of like when I mentioned, if we've got a non-deployed spouse that's really struggling with the deployment. I was listening to our commanding general give a talk about that and the concerns that they have. And he said, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. And that's pretty much the key. If we've got a parent, in this instance a mother, who's really, really struggling and not doing well with the deployment, it's just going to trickle down onto the children.
You've been describing this cycle, this deployment cycle, and what's known about it and its impact on families and on kids and on schools, all of which I'm assuming is well known within the jurisdiction where you're working. All of the kids are the kids of military personnel.
Correct.
Do you talk to audiences ever outside that world to share what you know?
I do.
And so, in a sense, I want to hear what you tell them, because that's also the audience we're trying to reach, sort of
Right.
the civilian side of this process that doesn't really know about this. What's your direct message to them?
Similar to what I was challenging to the teachers, which is to become familiar with the deployment cycle.
How do you do that? Do you just have to ask somebody, or?
Well, you mean to become familiar with it? There's got to be an in-service. There has to be some instruction where those that are working with these military kids, Guard and Reserve kids, will understand what it is that they're going through. A lot of what I try to do when I go to conferences is to work with mental health providers that are going to be working with these families. Once in a while, I'll speak before some civilian families, but the majority of what I'm doing is with mental health providers. And that's what I'm trying to do with them, is to explain to them, similar to what we've just been talking about, the intricacies of the deployment cycle.
Is that something that a civilian can learn and
I
come
do.
to understand?
I very much think so. Very much think so.
So teachers should set out to try to understand that.
I would think so. Yes, very, very much so.
So is reintegration the most difficult part of the deployment cycle?
It is one of the most important parts. When you look at the deployment cycle as a whole, as a stage from beginning to end, just the cycle of it, there are peaks and valleys of emotional demand. And this is where in the classroom we might see children exhibit those characteristics of poor attention, or grades dropping, or being withdrawn, etc. And those periods are very frequently before the soldier leaves and right after they leave. So for example, if we're looking at the pre-deployment stage, those weeks leading up to the soldier's deployment will be a period where we will see children struggle in the classroom, where they may become oppositional. Their focus may wane. They may get into arguments easily, when typically they're not that way, okay? And then after the soldier leaves, in the new stages into the deployment cycle, or deployment stage, those weeks are also going to be a moment in the stages where the child is going to have trouble, okay? And then right before R&R, sometimes during R&R, because the child isn't getting what they want. They want dad or mom, who's ever returned, but mom or dad is resting or needs their time. So they're wondering what's wrong with them, that they're not getting the attention. Usually, and like I had said before, it's a couple of days leading up to it. But those are periods where we're going to see an escalation in these characteristics. And then, of course, right before the reunion stage, right before the soldier returns, we'll see some of these behaviors manifest then as well.
So you're not saying that reintegration is the least, you're saying the other ones are, so where you took issue with the teachers is they're saying that reintegration is the worst phase. They're all challenging.
I think they're all significant. The reintegration could be the worst simply because the soldier's there for good, and whatever issues that soldier is bringing back with them, and many of them do have some post-traumatic stress or physical injuries, or just the basic getting used to being back in the house.
Yeah.
Because roles have to be completely renegotiated. Once the soldier returns, what are they going to be apt to do now? Will they be the ones to take out the trash? Because the son's been doing it quite well for 6 weeks. Or the chef, will they now do the cooking? Will they now be the one to take the child to school? All these different roles and responsibilities need to be renegotiated.
Do boys experience this differently from girls?
I wouldn't say that there's a big difference between that. I think they both have the issues that kids just typically have. Now, I will mention this, that young children that don't understand the deployment cycle, all they know is that dad is gone, will put self-inflicted guilt on themselves, thinking that it's their fault that dad had to leave or mom had to leave. And I've heard young toddlers, kindergartners say, if only I'd kept my room clean, maybe dad wouldn't have left.
Really?
Or if I'd have been better with my chores, or I'm going to do really good in school so dad will come back. Because it just doesn't make sense to these young children that the soldier parent has to leave. And for them, the magical thinking kicks in. They're going to think whatever they can to make it make sense to them.
Do you think that's harder, actually, than it is for older kids who understand why their mom or dad is gone?
Probably so. I think all the different ages of these children are struggling with it in their own way. And in some instances, the family doesn't know where the soldier is. And depending on where the soldier is, there may be access to communication devices or not.
Right.
So there could be periods of days or weeks where there's no communication, and that's not anybody's fault. That's just the situation of where they are.
Or there could be news on television saying that bad things are happening where their dad is.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, therein lies even some more stress and trauma.